Ozzy Osbourne and Mick Jagger's fight over Elvis Presley's 2 million guitar rock legends, one legendary guitar, and an auction war that would test the soul of rock and roll itself. Before we begin, if you love stories where music meets destiny, subscribe to Voices of Darkness, tap like, and share this with a friend who still believes in the magic of a six-string. If you love Ozzy Osbourne, prove it. Share this video and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. London's cold has a way of sharpening sound. Car doors click like castanets, heels strike the pavement with strict rhythm, and breath turns to thin silver fog that drifts and dissolves above Mayfair's polished streets. A black car slid to a stop outside the grand portico of a venerable auction house whose name didn't need to be spoken. Its reputation hummed like a hidden chord. Inside, velvet ropes, hushed money, the faint smell of old paper and new perfume. On the mezzanine, spotlights converged on a single case. Within it, a 1954 Martin D28, honeyed spruce mellowed by decades, rosewood gleaming like midnight water. The placard below it read with restrained authority, "From the personal collection of Elvis Presley." Associated with early studio sessions and foundational recordings of rock and roll, people didn't so much gather as orbit. There were murmurs in French and Japanese, a crisp American whistle of breath, the groan of a leather chair as a collector sat and peered through small binoculars. Phones were out. Bids would be placed. Histories would be revised. Fortunes might change hands. The guitar, the object, the relic, the thing that started 1,000 other things, waited behind glass like a saint's bone in a reliquary. Man in a wide-brimmed hat and dark glasses took a corner seat and lowered himself with a little sigh, feeling the ache in his knees and the sweet, unexplainable tremor you feel when time folds and a boy from Aston slips back into your chest. Ozzy Osbourne rolled the brim between finger and thumb. If Sharon were here, she'd tease him out of the moment and into the ledger. You can't even play, love. You're buying a story you're already in. But Sharon wasn't here. Tonight he was his own counsel and his own confession. He looked at the Martin again and felt the strange volcanic ache of gratitude. He remembered cheap radios, and a voice that cracked the sky over Birmingham. He remembered how sound had made the world bigger than the factory gates. Bloody thing, he whispered, meaning the guitar, meaning destiny. The house lights dimmed by a fractional degree. Enough to tighten pulses, enough to invite silence to sit down and behave. On stage, the auctioneer smiled as if he already knew the ending. A second hum moved through the room like wind through organ pipes. Heads turned in a wave that moved from door to aisle to roped-off row. Mick Jagger entered with the walk he was born for, loose and economical. A billionaire saunter that still smelled faintly of a Brixton dance hall. In a dark suit trimmed to suggestion, not statement, he paused, surveyed, smirked. He saw Ozzy. Ozzy saw him. 30 yards, 20-10. Jagger's grin made a gentle mockery of the solemn room. "Well, well," he said. That London burr like a grin turned into sound. "Look what the cat dragged in." Ozzy stood, hat brim tipping in acknowledgement. "Mick, you old peacock," he said. "Come to buy a conscience?" "Conscience is priceless," Jagger said. "Guitars, on the other hand." His eyes flicked to the case. "That one's a proper beauty. We're not kids anymore," Ozzy said. "But we still know a miracle when we see one." A crackle of cameras. The room leaned in. The auctioneer, delighted, polished his spectacles with a white cloth, performative nonchalance masking the thunder of opportunity in his chest. The auctioneer's voice spread across the room like good whiskey. "Ladies and gentlemen, we come to this evening's crown jewel. A 1954 Martin D28, associated with Presley's earliest studio period. Our estimate begins at numbers are funny. To a baker, 500,000 is a fairy tale. To a hedge fund manager, it's Tuesday. To an artist, it's a wayside coin in the quest for the right chord." The room seemed to nod at the number as if they'd all agreed ahead of time that reality could flex tonight. £500,000, the auctioneer said. "Do I have?" Two paddles rose, almost lazily, almost inevitably, from the gentleman in the hat. "And from the gentleman?" "Ah, quite." The auctioneer pivoted, charm logarithmically increasing. "A bid from Mr. J, from the right-hand section." The room giggled like schoolchildren allowed to keep a secret they couldn't possibly keep. 600, the auctioneer called. The paddles remained aloft. 7, 8. The numbers ticked like a metronome no one wished to break. Ozzy felt heat in his face and a child's panic near his ribs. What if it goes? What if it goes to someone who thinks this is an ornament? He thought of radio static and of Elvis's voice making a window where a wall used to be. He wasn't buying a guitar. He was buying the miracle he owed his life to. Across the aisle, Mick's eyes shone hard and merry. Here was a dance he knew, numbers and poker faces, a rhythm older than rehearsal rooms. At 1 million, the rest of the room began to peel off, their fantasies replaced by budgets, their dreams postponed. But 2 men remained, the gravity of their names holding the numbers in orbit. 1,000,002, the auctioneer breathed, half croon, half count, an extraordinary contest. Mick glanced across the aisle. Fancy a chat, Ozzy? In a minute, Ozzy said without looking away from the guitar. The bid hovered at 1.2 million, the air sweet with spectacle, the cameras trembling in hands that pretended they weren't. Ozzy's paddle lowered a fraction, not surrender. Recalibration. He turned, caught Jagger's eye, and in that split second something older than rivalry flickered. 2 kids with cheap amps and impossible dreams. 2 men long past the carnival of posing. Ozzy's mouth tipped into a crooked line. Let's buy it together. Mick blinked, the subtlest falter in his choreography. He recovered immediately, a grin cutting neat and dangerous as a scalpel. Joint custody, he said. Like 2 gentlemen with 1 dog? Like 2 blokes with 1 homeland, Ozzy said, voice low. We put it where it belongs. Not behind one of our doors, Mick hesitated. The auctioneer sensed drama and fanned it. Small motions, brighter lights. The room rustled. Right then, Jagger said. Let's make history. Their paddles rose in tandem. 1.3 million, they said together, and laughter spilled into applause. The room grateful for an ending that felt like a song's last chord resolving at last. Sold, the auctioneer sang, gavel kissing wood. Taste both. London does pubs like poets do metaphors. The George Tavern had ceilings the color of old tobacco and windows that blurred rain into impressionism. The guitar sat between them in a fitted case as if it too needed a pint to steady its nerves. They drank. They remembered. They lied the way old friends lie, sanding off corners. For a while the case on the table was a trophy, not a test. Then Mick's voice slid into a different register. Calm, practical. A businessman's blanket thrown over a campfire. Ozzy, he said, let's talk strategy. Ozzy stiffened, the way a dog does when a friendly hand becomes a firm leash. There's a collector in Tokyo, Mick went on, eyes bright with figures only he could see. Glass vaults, temperature control, museum-level curation. He'd pay, well, let's say more than we paid, several times over. We could what? Ozzy asked softly. Turn legacy into arbitrage? Mick didn't flinch. He never did. In the right hands, it'll be preserved better than in either of ours. And we've done our bit, rescuing it from a vanity buyer. We can place it strategically. Everyone wins. Ozzy looked at the case. His reflection blurred in the lacquered wood. He saw not the prince of darkness, nor the headlines, nor the debts settled and unsettled by time. He saw a boy who thought music might be a boat big enough for all the ones who'd never had a ticket. This isn't a stock, he said. Everything is a stock, Mick said, not unkindly. If you look at it right. Silence pooled. Then Ozzy stood, surprising himself at how steady he was. Open it, he said. Mick cocked his head. What now? Open the case, Ozzy said again, and there was something in his voice that made even the jukebox lower its eyes. Latches clicked like sentences ending. The lid rose. The pub's amber light found the Martin's face and it glowed. Not gold, but the darker thing gold wishes it could be. Old honey. Burnished time. Scarred prettily where 1,000 strums had written and erased small histories. People turned without meaning to. A barmaid with a sleeve of roses halted with a tray. A couple arguing about rent forgot their line. The door sighed, and rain quieted as if the weather were listening. Ozzy hovered his hand above the soundboard the way you hover over something holy if you weren't raised to touch holy things. His voice, when it came, filled corners. July 5th, 1954, he said. Memphis. Sun Records. A boy with a voice too big for the room. He picked up one of these and he made a window in time, and some of us crawled through that window into a life we couldn't afford. He told them about radios under blankets, about cheap beer tasting like sacrament after a gig that worked. He told them what it's like when the crowds shout as a tide that lifts a battered little boat like yours. He told them about poverty not as a backdrop but as a weather system, about how music can be a ladder dropped from a helicopter at the last minute. "It's not wood and wire," he said, fingers trembling. "Not touching. It's proof. Proof that a person can be bigger than the room they're born in." He turned to Mick then, eyes not angry anymore, just clear. "And you want to put it in a vault for one man?" Mick's lips parted. His hands were very still on the varnished table. He looked like a dancer whose music had been replaced with a heartbeat that didn't know the steps. He looked for a second very young. "You're right," he whispered, the words as soft as a white flag. "I lost the plot." Ozzy closed the case with a gentleness that felt like respect rather than retreat. He rested both palms on the lid. "We do the right thing," he said. "News, when it is clean and simple, can run the world like a current." By morning, papers in London, New York, Tokyo, and 1,000 smaller ports carried variations on a headline that sounded like a song you already loved. "Ozzy Osbourne donates Elvis guitar to Mick Jagger praises move. He did the right thing." In Memphis, staff at the museum gathered around a conference table and spoke in tones you save for births and funerals. Lawyers drafted stipulations with care. The guitar would be displayed permanently in the childhood home exhibit, visible to anyone for free. No VIP rope, no velvet ticket. A clear glass, a simple plaque, a story told properly. Sharon called from the kitchen, voice full of that fierce love that lifts and scolds in the same breath. "You did good, love. Now make a cuppa before the world gets here." Ozzy laughed into the handset, feeling lighter in his bones than he'd felt in years. "I thought you'd kill me." "I will," she said, smiling in her words. "If you ever doubt what music's for again." Mick texted a sentence that cost him nothing and everything. "You were right to remember." "I was wrong to forget." "Me too." Memphis air is humid the way memory is humid, filled with things you can't see that still touch your skin. A small crowd gathered by the little white house where the boy had learned to be a man. The guitar, at last, sat in a case that was all transparency and no theater. Kids pressed fingers to the glass, leaving prints that the staff would wipe away with reverence, not irritation. An old man wearing a trucker cap removed it and held it to his chest for a moment he didn't explain. A schoolteacher led a line of fourth graders and told them that the world used to be smaller than a radio, and that one day a radio made the world larger than anyone knew to expect. Ozzy stood a half step back, alone and not alone. He watched a boy with a shy slouch and scuffed shoes stare like he was watching a key turn in a lock that might be his. The boy turned and saw him, and for a moment it seemed like they recognized each other across the river of years. "Thank you," the boy said, not sure who he was thanking. "You're welcome," Ozzy said, not sure which of them he was answering. Mick arrived quietly, sunglasses like a line break, hands in his pockets. He stood beside Ozzy and they didn't speak. They just looked. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of chords. At last, Mick said, "I'm sorry." Ozzy shrugged, shoulders near laughter. "We all forget sometimes. The trick is remembering again before the lights go up." They shook hands without ceremony. It felt less like a deal and more like a prayer. Cameras wanted a speech. The museum wanted a speech. The world, which had once learned to take its cues from the gossip of gods, wanted a speech. Ozzy gestured to the guitar. "This is a door," he said simply, "and doors are meant to open." He told no stories of chart positions, no stories about money, no catalog of touring statistics. He told one story, the only one that ever mattered, about a boy who wanted to sing so hard that the universe had to make more room for him, and how once the room was made, others could breathe there too. "We're not owners," he said. "We're witnesses. We get to look. We get to listen. If we're lucky, we get to carry the sound a little further." There were tears in the quiet. There always are when the truth shows up unannounced and sits down with its shoes still wet from the weather. Night in Memphis draped itself over Beale Street like a satin jacket. Neon buzzed. Brass laughed in doorways. Somewhere, a drummer argued with a rhythm he'd eventually love. Ozzy walked alone for a few blocks because sometimes joy is too large to share politely. He paused at a storefront window and saw his reflection double itself in the glass. The man he was and the boy he had been, both staring at a world that had been opened by sound. From a bar down the block, a cover band stumbled into That's All Right, the guitar jangly, the tempo a hair too fast, the singer a little sharp on the first chorus. It was perfect. It was more perfect because it wasn't perfect. It was the sound of people trying, and trying is the hymn we all know by heart. Ozzy smiled and put his hands in his pockets and kept walking, the night generous around him. Back. At Graceland, a security guard making rounds paused by the display and tilted his head. For a heartbeat, he swore he could hear the low ghost of a voice ribbing the strings, the sound of a king laughing quietly to himself, pleased that his old friend had found his way home. If this story hit a nerve, if you believe music is more than charts and checks, prove your love for Ozzy Osbourne. Subscribe to Voices of Darkness, like this video, and share it with someone who still keeps a playlist for rainy nights. Help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers so we can keep telling the stories that matter. Not the gossip, not the glitter, the heart. Because legends don't live in vaults. They live wherever the next kid picks up a guitar and decides the room he was born in isn't big enough anymore.